Good evening. My name is Shamika Rhymes, and welcome to the fourth annual Healthy Kids Summit hosted by blackdoctor.org. This summit allows us to focus on the health and well-being of our children, especially as a new school year is underway. And our goal is to empower you as parents, as caregivers, to make sure that your child is healthy and thriving. So we're kicking this summit off tonight with a critical issue that is affecting our children: tobacco and vaping use. The rise in vaping among the youth is an epidemic at this point, and the data is clear. Black youth are disproportionately impacted by its dangers. So it's time to clear the air and protect our future generations. So during tonight's panel, which is titled Vaping Unmasked, the Real Dangers for Growing Lungs, we will explore those hidden dangers of vaping and discuss strategies to empower you as parents, teenagers, and educators. So make sure that you share this with your network. Drop any questions that you have tonight in the chat. Let me know where you're watching from as well. And of course, we'll get to those questions as we can tonight. Let me introduce you to tonight's guests. Well, actually, we're going to bring them on and then I'm going to let them introduce themselves because I think they can do a better job than I can. But I'm going to go ahead and just call them out one by one. Dr. Winifred Booker is here. I did hear her say she is a pediatric dentist. So introduce yourself, please.
Oh, thank you for having me. It is a super important topic to discuss tonight. My name is Dr. Winifred Booker. I'm a pediatric dentist from Baltimore, and I own Valley Dental Pediatrics, and I also run the Children's Oral Health Institute. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us tonight. We've got Dr. Anastasia Williams joining us as well tonight.
Hi, hello everyone. I am Dr. Anastasia Williams. I'm a general pediatrician in Pasadena, California. I'm the clinical director of pediatrics at the San Fernando Community Health Center. I am also the CEO of VIP Pediatric Concierge Pediatrics, and I am the president-elect for the Association of Black Women's Physicians, and I look forward to our discussion today.
Thank you for joining us tonight. And then we've got Brian King joining us tonight as well. Hi, Brian.
Yes, hello, I'm Brian King. I'm a executive vice president for U.S. programs at the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. I am a PhD level epidemiologist and have been researching tobacco for about 20 years. And before my current role, I was the lead U.S. regulator for tobacco in the United States. Pleasure to be here.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for all of you. Thank you for taking the time out to come and join us here at blackdoctor.org for this important discussion. This is just a very casual conversation, so feel free to jump in wherever. But I'm going to start this question off. And this might be a good question for all of you. So I'm going to start with you, Brian. Why was vaping marketed as a safer alternative to smoking? And what do we now know that challenges that idea?
Well, e-cigarettes entered the United States around 2008, and since that time, we've gotten a lot of evidence on the risks of these products, and we do know that as a general product class, they have lower risk than a cigarette, but you have to remember, that doesn't mean there's no risk, and also cigarettes are a pretty big comparator as having 7,000 chemicals and 70 carcinogens, but, you know, so it's to remember the inherent risks of these products, particularly to kids, and we know that it contains nicotine, which is highly addictive. It can harm the developing adolescent brain. It can prime the brain for addiction to other things. And so it's important to understand those risks and also to make sure that kids are educated about those risks as the science continues to emerge about the adverse health effects.
Absolutely. Thank you. Before I moved on, do either of you want to weigh in on that as well?
Well, I appreciate the information, the 7,000 chemicals, and that's something that I will share with my children and families because we know how the different chemicals can impact the mouth. So, yeah, it's great information.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And what I would add to that is that when nicotine, when vaping first was becoming a big thing among young people, I had so many teens that would come to me and say, you know, why can't I vape? It's safer than cigarettes. You know, it's not like it's going to damage you. But I think what people don't realize is that when you're vaping, in your typical one vial of vape, it can have as much nicotine in it as a whole pack of cigarettes. So we know that it's dangerous. It is not harmful. It's addictive. And for growing lungs and brains, it's especially harmful for kids. And there really is no safe amount. Even if it says 0% nicotine, you don't know that for sure. There's still some nicotine in there. So it's clear it's not safe.
Thank you for that. I think we should double back here because I just thought there may be some parents watching that have never heard of vaping. They don't know what their child is doing. So let's explain what is vaping. Who wants to take that one on and explain what it is? Brian, how about you?
I can give it a go. So basically, vaping, it's known by a lot of terms, vapes, vaping, e-cigarettes, but basically it's an electronic device and it heats a liquid, sometimes called an e-liquid, that then produces an aerosol that the user inhales. And so these products may look different. Some of them are larger systems with tanks. Some of them are disposable. Some resemble everyday objects like a highlighter or even a video game, but they all function the same and they deliver that aerosol that the user inhales into their lungs. And as we've already heard, this aerosol contains harmful and potentially harmful ingredients to kids, including nicotine, but also ultrafine particles, volatile organic compounds, even heavy metals that can be inhaled very deep into the lungs.
Thank you for that explanation because, I tend to think, for myself, I didn't know if there was a difference between e-cigarettes and vaping or if they were two different things. So it sounds like it's pretty much the same thing. How common is vaping among teens and young adults today, and why does it seem to be growing completely and so quickly? Dr. Williams.
Vaping has become more and more common, particularly in areas that are vulnerable to getting lots of advertisement about, flavored cigarettes or flavored vapes. It comes in all different forms. Like Brian said, vaping mainly means you're inhaling something that's a liquid that's been an aerosol that's been heated up. And so it comes in lots of different names. And part of it may be that people don't realize when we talk about vaping or e-cigarettes, which is really just an umbrella term, there are so many other things that are included in that. Whether it's some of this I learned just looking at some of this information, the Elf Bar, Breeze, Flum, Hide. These are all things that sound benign, It's particularly vulnerable for young adults and males. I think, in communities where you're seeing lots of advertisement about flavored devices, and just being bombarded with images that make it seem like it's benign, it makes us particularly more vulnerable as a community to not be afraid to try it and start it.
Thank you. Let's see. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Trying to do too much at the same time. Well, Dr. Booker, as a pediatric dentist, you're often one of the first professionals that sees the direct impact of a child's habit. So, what are the effects that you have seen that vaping has had on a child's oral health?
Well, one of the things that really gives it away is that you can smell it. And so they come into my office, particularly, the teenagers, they come in and you immediately smell it. So did they pre-medicate prior to their dental appointment? Because what did they have in that vape? Was it marijuana? Was it one of the chemicals? And if it was marijuana, how altering is that to their behavior? How does it impact the fact that I may have to give you an injection? And so I have the conversation with the kids as well as with their parents, because as a pediatric dentist, I have young parents bringing their young children in, and it may be the parent that has in fact consumed the vaping or has done the vaping, but it impacts in terms of oral health. I always say it goes from the teeth to the tongue to the lungs. So you're inhaling that, but the impact on the gums, you can develop gum disease, dry mouth, tooth decay, because those particles, as Brian talked about, they land in the grooves of your teeth. And so they increase your risk of tooth decay, inflammation to the gums. And so when you have gum irritation and inflammation, that decreases your risk of being able to fight infection. You get increase in bacterial growth. So it has many, many ramifications to your dentition. Discoloration, so your teeth are brown. Also to your lips, you get dehydrated. One of the first signs of dehydration is your dry lips, and so your lips are discolored. and they're dry as well. So there are many ramifications to the mouth. But one of my biggest concerns is being pre-medicated. What was in that vape? Also, Brian talked about the wetness of the particles. You're inhaling something that's already wet. And Dr. Williams as well listed all of the different disguises they have. They think it's not a big deal, but it is a big deal.
Thank you. So now that we've talked about, like you said, the mouth first, and then it goes to the lungs, Dr. Williams, what happens to the lungs when a young person is vaping?
Thank you for that. The vaping causes a lot of damage to airway by causing irritation. It causes you to cough. It can cause chest tightness, decreased exercise tolerance, meaning you can't run and do sports as well as you used to. And when you have repeated bouts of inflammation, that's each time you vape, it can set the stage for chronic bronchitis and asthma-like symptoms. And so it's particularly dangerous to the lungs. Dr. Booker mentioned that sometimes when kids think they're just vaping regular vapes with nicotine, it can be spiked with marijuana, right? And in addition to the marijuana, what we know is sometimes they mix in something called vitamin E acetate to kind of mix it together. And while vitamin E is good for your skin, it's good for your immune system, it is not good for your airway, not at all. And I would say around 2019, we actually had a crisis where kids were, young people were vaping nicotine and THC or marijuana, not being aware that there's vitamin E in there, and it caused a chronic, a severe lung illness that landed a lot of kids in the hospital. You asked earlier about the numbers, and I forgot to give the numbers. So in 2024, 5.9% of US middle and high schoolers were vaping. That's about 1.63 million kids that used e-cigarettes. 7.8% high schoolers were using them, and 3.5 middle schoolers. I think that's so scary because the damage that these devices do to your lungs, and I didn't even get into brain development. I don't want to, hog the whole thing. But young people's brains are still developing, and nicotine has this way of making you addicted, or it increases dopamine. It makes you addicted to it. And then that can cause other problems with attention, behavior, mood. We're seeing a lot of like ADHD. We're seeing depression and anxiety. And their brains are not even finished developing. Your brain doesn't completely develop. It's not completely developed until you're 26 years old, 26. So when you have so many kids that are thinking it's okay, it has gone down a little bit since 2023, and we don't see as many of the chronic problems we saw in 2019. And I think it's because a lot of pediatricians and everyone is really pushing for kids. If you vape, you better be careful what you get in. Don't vape, but you can't just say don't do something. You have to tell young people how to be safe, right? So I think people are more on the lookout. The FDA is getting stricter about, who's allowed to purchase vapes. Now it's 21 years old, and I don't want to skip ahead. But the bottom line is that vaping is not healthy for your lungs. There are chemicals in there that are not safe for kids, even if they are flavored, and it's bad for brain development, short-term and long-term harm.
I think Dr. Williams makes a great point in terms of the safety issue of it all. And that's one of the things that I try to talk to my patients about. Some of the kids say, well, Dr. Book, I just wanted to relax. I don't do it that frequently. Well, what about the alternative? If you feel like you need something to relax, why not consume a chewable? Not that I'm promoting that necessarily, but is it better for your respiratory health to do something besides smoking? If you feel like you need something to take the edge off. My teacher got on my nerves today. My mother is always on me. You know how all the different dynamics that we face with our teenagers. So I try to talk to them about being really grassroots and talk to them about alternatives.
That's a great way to approach it, because I was about to say, what are they stressed about?
Right.
Girl, they have a lot to be stressed about these days. I'm not going to go into shootings. I will leave it alone. We're not
Yeah,
talking.
yeah. Aside from that, I mean, I guess it is, yes, the stress of just school and just everything
Life.
in the world. Yeah,
Being a
yeah.
teenager changing, Brian, I know
Mhm.
you know all about it.
Well, that brings me to my next question, because Brian, where are these kids getting the e-cigarettes and vaping materials? Where are they getting this
Yeah,
stuff?
so we have some good data on this, and it's actually the same data source that you heard Dr. Williams talking about earlier, the National Youth Tobacco Survey. And what those data show is that social sources are the most a significant factor where kids access these products. And so, what is a social source? That's friends, and it's also family members. And so, we do know that people can buy these products out in public areas, but as was noted, the age of sale is 21. But even then, kids are able to get this through different mechanisms, including their friends and family. And so that's why it's so important that we educate everybody about the risks of these products, and also work to make sure that we do everything we can to prevent that transmission from social sources. And a great action was increasing the age of sale to 21 in the United States, because it prevented those older kids that were just old enough to buy them from doing so and then providing them to their younger friends. But of course, kids still will try to find ways, and that's why a comprehensive approach is key, to make sure we prevent kids from accessing them from family, friends, and other sources.
I appreciate that. I that social sources language. I have young parents, as I've shared with you a couple of times on this call, and I think it's so unfair to our infants and toddlers and young children that their clothes are full of that smoke, and they have to, deal with that stigma. They go to school, they smell. Who was smoking? Was it the first grader, or was it the 22-year-old mother who was smoking? And so I think it's certainly one of the most important things is to be unafraid to approach families and talk to them about the dangers of vaping and the impact it has on the entire family and the health on children. We talk about secondhand smoke, thirdhand smoke. That is thirdhand smoke is smoke that is down on the ground. You're sitting on the sofa smoking, and your infant and toddlers are walking around and they're subjected to that. It increases your risk for asthma. I think Dr. Williams spoke about that earlier. So I really appreciate this entire conversation.
Absolutely. Dr. Williams, did you want to weigh in as well?
I have all these thoughts and things I want to say. The big thing I want to say is when I have young people, and this is a plug, hopefully if there are any parents out there listening, when I do a visit in the office, the annual, what we call checkup with the patient, for my teens and preteens, but especially for my teens, I always have a section of the visit where I speak to the child alone. And a lot of parents get offended by that. They're like, well, she tells me everything. She knows what she's supposed to be doing, or he is not doing that. He's a good boy. But this is so critical because peers are a very strong influence with young people. That's probably one of their biggest influences by the time they're teens. You get them when they're young and you pour as much as you can into them and just believe God that all that you've given them, they will use that as a resource to make good choices. But ultimately, my job as a pediatrician is for them to feel free to tell me the truth without being worried that they're going to get in trouble, and for me to be non-judgmental. So what does that mean? I can tell you, I'll say, do you vape? Have you vaped? Have you ever vaped before? Do any of your friends vape? And if they say yes, don't do that. You should not. No, that's not going to work. They already get that from their parents,
Right.
So my goal is to really be open-minded and find out how it is they vape. I like to ask, how did you get it? Because of what Brian said, it's the social circles. Like, what do you mean you buy it at school? Where did you get that money? Who's giving you money to buy it at school? Who's bringing it to school? How'd your friends get it?
Mm-hmm.
And then to really focus more on health and longevity and like all the good you can do in the world if you don't do it. You want to be a great athlete. Let me tell you what's going to happen if you vape. You know, you want to, when you grow up, you want to be what do they say, a YouTube star singer. Well, you may not get to grow up if you end up with cancer because you've been vaping so at such a young age, and it's caused brain cancer or lung cancer. You know, so I try to focus on those things, and I had to squeeze that in there. So don't get offended if your doctor wants to talk to your teen alone. It's really about making sure that there's another avenue, another person on the team to help them make better choices, and for them to feel open and to kind of just share their experiences.
Looks like we have a question in the chat. Tony Green wants to know what can be done to an older person that's giving these youngsters vapes. Brian, how about you? Do you have an answer for that one?
Well, I'll say that the laws that are currently on the books are for those in the supply chain. And so that's for a retailer who's selling a product. So if you do know of a retailer that is directly selling to youth, you can always report that to the FDA. But if it's just a family member or friend, this is really where the education and the conversation comes in play, to really reinforce to them the evidence that we know about the risks of these products, and that them providing these products to youth where there's particular dangers is not good for them or for public health.
Thank you.
I wish my lawyer husband was in here with me, but there are certainly laws in place already about giving alcohol to minors and liability if you serve alcohol to minors in your home. I can't talk about the details of all that because I'm not a lawyer. What would be interesting to me is if that precedent, because the legal age to give alcohol, to drink alcohol and buy alcohol is 21, if that precedent also carries over based on the Congress's rule, does it carry over also to other drugs or vaping? I can't answer that question, but I would imagine, you know, I mean, some of us would be like, oh, throw them in jail, arrest them, you know, but of course it's all about, well, usually it's all about legal precedents and how the legal system can step in. The other thing we always have an option for is child protective services, you know, so if a parent is knowingly permitting their child to vape, drink alcohol, get drunk, you know, is that endangering the child, their health and well-being? And can authorities like social work and stuff step in and intervene to stop the behavior to protect the child?
Thank you. Thank you. Tony says thanks. Thank you for that great question, Tony. Let's double back because you actually brought it up, Dr. Williams, about peer pressure. But what role does, you know, you've got peer pressure, now you've got social media, then you've got, like you were mentioning, you've got YouTube, TikTok, all the things, and you see all the people that look cool doing it. But what role does all this play when it comes to the youth?
Plays a big role, big role. Young people are very swayed, like I mentioned earlier, by their peers. It influences the decisions they make. For example, a personal example for us, my family, is that my youngest sister, you know, we like to say birds of a feather flock together. You need to be careful the friends you have. And part of that is the neighborhood you live in, you know. So I grew up in the Bronx, in New York City, and my baby sister was getting in with the crowd of people that we did not like her being with. And we would joke, I'm Haitian, we're going to send her back to Haiti. We're going to get her in line. You can't be doing these kinds of things. But ultimately, all the things we said, you know, the fight, and families know this, you know, you try and fight so hard. And sometimes it's like they cannot hear you. They can't hear it when it comes from you. It has to come from other people that they respect. It has to come in environments that are more nurturing and kind of water the things, the good fruits and flowers and things that we want to grow in their lives. So for me and my family, we moved out of New York City to upstate New York. And just by moving and putting her in a different environment with different people, and you know, a neighborhood with grass and trees, and you go for a walk, and it helped change her mindset And it also kind of dimmed the influence. She still went to the same high school. She's a Broadway actress now, by the way. She's amazing. But she still went to the High School of Music and Arts. But when she came home, she was surrounded by just more positive images and speech and talk. So I say all of that to say, what influence do peers have? Peers have a lot of influence on young people, probably the most influence, but that's why we want to get them in environments where they're, whether it be in churches, the Boys and Girls Club, with close adult supervision, with adults leading discussions, group discussions that they're having with one another. In my opinion, I think that that's probably one of the best ways to help your kids be mindful of the peers that they choose, and give them the opportunity to be in an environment where they choose peers that they still going to get into trouble together. Okay, that's what they do. That's part of being young. But we don't want them vaping and then using other drugs. And next thing you understand what I'm saying. So yes, this has a very big influence.
Okay. Dr. Booker, did you want to weigh in on the role of peer pressure? I mean, what do you hear from your patients when they come in? Do they say, well, I saw it on social media, or I saw this, rapper or whoever doing it, so I thought I would try it?
Yeah, I think it's so glamorized, and the scent of it, people have interest because Brian talked about the different flavors and the different scents. And so I think it's alluring to kids. I had a 16-year-old girl, perfect A student, very mild-mannered. And she came in one day and I could smell it on her. And I said, do you smoke? She said, not cigarettes. And so they think it's okay. And so I think that I go back to educating children and families about it. And a picture is worth 1,000 words. In dentistry, we will show images of diseased teeth, of decayed teeth. And I think this generation, our young people, a little bit more vain. They seem to be more vain each generation. And so they want white teeth. They want sparkly teeth. They want diamonds on their teeth. And so they don't want that discoloration. So how about if we show them images of what vaping does to your teeth? Why not show them images of what vaping does to your lungs? And so I think that those kind of things will be helpful. But I think, again, the scent of it, the glamour, how it's been glamorized, every corner, particularly in inner city communities, have vaping here, hookah, vape. So there's the allure of that, and the belief that it's not dangerous. It's better than smoking. It's safer than smoking. It helps to relax you. So I think all of those things, and so many kids are willing to try it because of those reasons.
Mm-hmm. That brings me to my next question. And Brian, I'll start with you. How do those flavored vape products affect a teen's likelihood to start and continue with the vaping?
Yeah, so flavors are certainly a key driver of youth use of these products. I like to say that the advertising will lead a horse to water, the flavors get them to drink, and the nicotine keeps them coming back for more. Mm-hmm. That trifecta of factors is really what's driving youth e-cigarette use, and also similar factors that have driven tobacco use for many years, including cigarettes, decades ago. And so when it comes to flavors, there's particularly appealing ones when it comes to e-cigarettes. And when we look at the data, we know that about 90% of kids who are using e-cigarettes are using flavored varieties. And we know that the vast majority who are using these products first start with a flavored variety. And when you look at which are most appealing, it's candy, it's fruit flavors with a variety of different names, including things like unicorn puke. I'm not quite sure what that tastes like, but you name it. There are thousands of chemicals out there, many with youth appealing flavors. And it's also compounded by the way these products are packaged and manufactured, in many cases to resemble video games and electronics and cartoon characters. And so ultimately it's that full cadre of different factors, including the flavors, that are driving kids to try these. And then coupled with that high nicotine content that we've talked about, it keeps them coming back for more.
Mm-hmm. I see we've got another question from Tasha Hosang. Hey, Tasha. She says, what commitments would you like to see from TikTok, Instagram, YouTube to stop youth vape marketing? Well, that's a good question. How about you, Brian? Or I'm sorry, Dr. Williams, go ahead.
Yeah, I love that question. You mentioned something, Ms. Rhymes. You mentioned social media, okay?
Yes.
And we know that all of us really, but especially our teens, spend a tremendous amount of time on social media,
Mhm.
whether it be TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Facebook is not young people. They say that's for old people. That's for my
That's
generation. That question is critical because, like Dr. Booker said, our young people, really our society in general, we are pretty vain, right? And it makes me think of that commercial that I'm sure many of you have seen, where there's one with a woman and there's one with a man, and they're talking. They don't have their
Mhm.
voice. They're talking like this, and
Yeah.
it's a commercial about smoking, right? Cigarettes, for people to see. You know, it was glamorized when it was first a big thing as a high class thing you did, but now look at how your life could end up,
Mhm.
if you continue to do this. And I do agree that social media platforms, or really, but platforms are driven by individuals. So I agree that perhaps we should be launching the American Academy of Pediatrics, or even us, the Association of Black Women's Physicians. We should be using that social media, to show them visually the ramifications of vaping, specifically vaping, because they still think it's safer. Even that's, well,
Right.
I'm not smoking cigarette. I'm not smoking, so that's not going to happen to me. Yeah, it could still happen to you.
Mhm.
So I do think that's an excellent question, which makes an excellent point that, we already know that for decades, tobacco companies have saturated Black neighborhoods with marketing of flavored vapes and cigarettes and things like that. We need to make sure that we saturate social media and our communities with the truth and the facts in a way that they'll hear us. They're visual people, like Dr. Booker said. So use that vanity, to exploit, the harmfulness, the harms that vaping does.
Absolutely. You brought up a good point because I know what that commercial with the voice thing that I was like, nope, I won't even try it.
Yeah,
That scared me.
and if I can put on a plug, so that's CDC's Tips for Former Smokers campaign, which has been around for over a decade. Right now, the people responsible for that were removed. The CDC's Office on Smoking Health at CDC. And so we're going to have big gaps in ability to message if we see these campaigns go away. And FDA also has a youth focused campaign getting at the same things that Dr. Williams was talking about, called The Real Cost, which is an electronic campaign focused in digital gaming, social media, that educates kids about e-cigarettes and prevention. And that's also an FDA government campaign. And so we know these campaigns work, but they cost money to implement and reach
Mhm.
youth. And that's why they have to continue. And right now we have a very real threat at the federal level with these important campaigns being removed.
So with that, I think we have to do some grassroots things, and in terms of social media, maybe go into the classroom, get back into the classroom, and educate our middle schoolers and our elementary school kids about smoking. And if you show, Brian, you remember the campaign about the cigarette. Kissing someone that smokes is like licking an ashtray, and what would little kids say? Ew. And so I think that we have to start earlier now, because we are losing so much at the CDC level, and not able to educate in the same way.
Mhm. Brian, what policies are currently in place to regulate e-cigarettes and are they effective?
Yeah, so the good news is when it comes to tobacco control, we have over a half century of science showing us what works. Not all risk factors have that luxury, but for many years since the first Surgeon General's report on smoking in the mid 1960s, we've seen policies develop that show us what prevents initiation of tobacco product use, but also what helps promote cessation and creates an environment where these products are less accessible. That said, you can apply that same paradigm to e-cigarettes, and that's what we're seeing
Mhm.
nationally. And so increasing the price of products is the single most effective intervention to prevent use, including among kids, including e-cigarettes and smoke-free policies. So you can't use them in indoor public areas like as restaurants and other indoor environments, including e-cigarettes and mass reach health communication campaigns, so that we're educating the public about the risks of these products, including e-cigarettes in sales that prohibit underage users, including the recent increase of putting the underage sale age to 21 in order to buy tobacco products and e-cigarettes. And then more recently, we are also seeing newer types of policies, including those that will ban flavors in these products. And so there's currently 6 states, as well as over 400 communities across the United States that have prohibited flavors in tobacco products, including e-cigarettes. And so taken together, you have all these population-based policies, and importantly, they can be implemented at the national level as well as the state and local level. And we're starting to see that. And that's that comprehensive approach that's been the hallmark of tobacco control for many years. And we're now seeing it applied to e-cigarettes in a way that's helping to prevent youth initiation.
Wow. Okay. Dr. Williams, for young people who are already vaping, what resources or strategies can help them quit, throw it out, don't touch it ever again?
There are several organizations, a few of them Brian has already mentioned, that actually have programs and things that can help support young people and adults who are ready to make that change and to decrease or eventually stop usage. The idea really is to combine behavioral counseling. So behavioral counseling is important, right? Because you have to get your brain to disconnect the need to pick up a vape in order to feel good or safe or relaxed, right? You gotta rewire that, and a part of that is counseling. But there's also organizations like, I'm looking at This Is Quitting. It's done by the Truth Initiative. There's Smoke Free Text for Teens. There's My Life and My Quit. And these are some evidence-based resources that teenagers can access. All they have to do is text, and I'll see if I can put it in the chat, the information, and get the support that they need.
Thank you.
If I could share additionally to that, and Brian, you may be able to address this. There was a campaign the American Cancer Society put out, and it was cartoon-like. And I take this back to our middle schoolers and our elementary schoolers, where it was the wolf and the 3 pigs. And he said, I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down. But he had been smoking and he couldn't blow the house down. And so I think those kind of stories, or that kind of information really impacts elementary school kids, where they will reject cigarettes or will reject vaping. But I think, again, we have to start really early now, because it has been so glamorized that young kids think that, the smell of it is stimulating too. So I just always go back to being a pure pediatric dentist, go back to the younger, the better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Brian, did you want to weigh in on that as well?
No, I completely agree with what's been said, and I'll just add that if folks are looking for resources on cessation, teen.smokefree.gov is a great resource, and that is through the National Cancer Institute, and it has resources for educators, but also teens and clinicians. And if you're looking for any stats or information, you can also go to our website, is tobaccofreekids.org, and there's a lot of great information on the risks of these products, patterns of use, and other great materials that folks may find useful.
Thank you. So we talked about a lot of interesting things, but let's wrap this up in a bow. What message, if you could give one message directly to a teenager that's thinking about trying vaping, what would it be? I'll start with you, Dr. Booker.
Protect your teeth, your tongues, and your lung health. And you don't want brown teeth. You don't want gum disease. You don't want tooth decay. And so think twice before you do it. The American Dental Association, the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry as well has literature out to help parents to educate their kids about taking care of their oral health and how to avoid smoking or try to educate their kids about smoking and vaping.
Thank you. That just reminded me. I just spoke with a dentist last week on my show Celebration, and she mentioned that smoking is like cooking. She was a dentist, but she was talking about how smoking is almost like cooking your gums. That stuck with me for some reason. And so
Wow.
the
Right.
thought of that would make
Yes.
me not want to try anything. So maybe that is
Yes,
another
it
way.
decreases the blood flow to your gums. It causes dry mouth. So many ramifications to your oral health.
Thank you. Dr. Williams, what's that one message you would give to the teenager
Um,
thinking about it?
it's a short message. It's up to you to decide and to act to protect your body, your mind, your beauty, and your future. So make the right choice, because once you get started and get hooked, you can still make the choice, but it's a lot harder. So protect your body, your mind, and your future.
Thank you. That's a good one. Brian, how about you? What's that one message you would give the teenager?
My message would be that we need you, and you've got a lot of potential to contribute to society and the future. And in order to do that, you got to have functioning lungs and you got to have a functioning brain. And so at this critical period, don't assault it with inhaling aerosol into your lungs or using nicotine that's highly addictive and can harm development during a really critical period. We need you for success. And the best way to do that is to not use any substance, including e-cigarettes that can be harmful to your health.
Great advice from all of you. I want to thank you for coming on blackdoctor.org and joining us for our Healthy Kids Summit. This is the 4th annual one, so this is exciting. But this was a great panel full of a lot of information, and hopefully everyone was able to capture the resources that were mentioned. But for more information on the risks of tobacco and vaping use, you can head over to blackdoctor.org. We have lots of articles and resources there, but don't go anywhere because the Healthy Kids Summit continues. Next up, we're talking about why vaccines matter. So you don't want to miss that. That's coming up in just a few minutes. Thank you again to our panelists. This was a great conversation. And thank you to everyone in the chat that contributed questions. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.